Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. We're back to the normal week after a From Russia with Love repeat with a few additional bits last week. This show could have been 6, 7 or 8 hours long. It's been split up into two, because one piece is being prepared for an extra show, which may be this weekend, we'll see. And I was still left with about 6 hours, so I've managed to cut it down. There's a slight change in order. We have sub-op-ed, because I've brought some of the lesser pieces, because the op-ed pieces tonight are laced with hammers, and something that's rather rare on this planet called common sense. We have the usual intel. There's some hefty bits in that as well. Right, let's get into the show. And this is indicative of what's going on the financial world, which is chaos. And their desperate attempts to keep the old system going, which is going to fail ultimately. And the New Delhi and Abu Dhabi have inked a currency swap agreement to boost trade and investment without involvement of a third currency like the US dollar. And the swap is for an amount of 2 billion United Arab Emirates dirham, or 35 billion Indian rupees, which is roughly $495 million, according to the Indian embassy in Abu Dhabi. The bilateral currency swap agreement between India and the United Arab Emirates is expected to reduce the dependency on hard currencies, take note of that, like the US dollar. And it's also expected to give a push for the local currencies of the two nations and may reduce the impact of volatility in exchange rates arising from the dependency on the third currency. And it's also expected to reduce the transmission costs arising from exchange rate risk. That's the Federal Reserve, 10 cents on the dollar. The side also discussed cooperation in energy, security, trade, investments, space, defence and so on. With more than 50 billion in bilateral trade, the two countries are each other's largest trading partners. And India's foreign direct investment into the United Arab Emirates was 6.6 billion in 2017, while vice versa stood at 5.8. Mr. Buffett wants to make a big acquisition, which is a heads up. They're expecting a collapse. That's how it works. And the Oracle of Omar's Berkshire Hathaway conglomerate is stated to have nearly 130 billion in cash, which is complete and utter rubbish. He said something else then. That can be used in a deal, but that would be Buffett deeming worthy of buying at a time when stocks remain near record highs. Now, what he's doing is he's collecting cash and waiting for the crash, which they're trying to engineer, and then they buy up all the cheap stock. Decentralize it again. Now, soaring values or valuations have kept Buffett, who prefers to take the long-term view and wait for bargains. And it's now 5 years since his last major acquisition. And he told the Financial Times last week that Berkshire Hathaway turned down an overture last fall for jewellery retailer Tiffany to buy it. Yes, he's waiting for everything else, like certain other clowns, to crash. We'll see about that. The US has reversed its decision to brand China a currency manipulator Oh my, accusing others of doing what you've been doing is also common these days, as the two countries prepare to wind down their trade war. And the US said it had made the change because China had agreed to refrain from devaluing its currency to make its own goods cheaper for foreign buyers. And Washington and Beijing were expected to sign that Phase 1 pact, which was last week. Now, the deal is aimed at de-escalating the tit-for-tat tariff war the two countries have engaged in since 2018. Now, for new listeners, of which there are many, this is not a trade war between America the country and China the country or the respective governments. This is to do with bogus trade deals, be it the Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic and the various other trade deals that were done that are nothing to do with the governments or the countries and everything to do with rogue dragon groups making vast amounts of money on those deals. That's the real issue that's going on. They're fighting the dragon groups, not each other. So China has made enforceable commitments to refrain from competitive devaluation while promoting transparency and accountability, according to the US Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. Oh boy. And Donald Trump has repeatedly accused China, which is not correct, it's the dragon groups, of allowing the value of the yuan to fall, which is making the Chinese goods cheaper. This is because the global elites were transferring all the wealth from the West to the East. That's the whole reason for it. But on Monday, the US said that the value of the yuan had appreciated since August at the height of the trade war, and Mr. Munchkin also said that China had made enforceable commitments to refrain from devaluation and to share more information about its exchange rates. In this context, he said, the Treasury has determined that China should no longer be designated as a currency manipulator at this time. Said the real currency manipulators. You can't make this stuff up. Perhaps that's the first of my Thomasisms. That for those of you on Facebook will have seen that post. Let's see how many I can get through tonight. Leaked documents reveal how Africa's richest woman made her fortune through exploiting her own country, her own people, and corruption. Isabel dos Santos got access to lucrative deals involving land, oil, diamonds and telecoms when her father was president of Angola, which is a southern African country rich in natural resources. The documents show that she and her husband were allowed to buy valuable state assets in a series of suspicious deals, and Miss Santos says that the allegations against her are entirely false, which is not correct, and that they are politically motivated witch hunt by the Angolan government, some of which are not correct also. The former president's daughter has made the UK her home and owns expensive properties in central London, and she's already under criminal investigation by the authorities in Angola for corruption, and her assets in the country have been frozen. Now, the BBC Panorama has been given access to more than 700,000 leaked documents about the billionaire's business empire, and most were obtained by the platform to protect whistleblowers in Africa and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. That's a bit of a misnomer. And they've been investigated by 37 media organisations, including The Guardian and Portugal's Expresso newspaper. Now, the average income in Angola, to put this in all perspective, The average income in Angola is $4,170 a year. But this actually masks the big disparities, as 30% of the population live in complete poverty, which is less than $1.90 a day. Meanwhile, it's the second biggest oil producer in Africa, and also a major diamond producer. We'll have more on Miss Santos later in an op-ed piece. The University of California at Berkeley's Executive Director of Financial Planning and Analysis was arrested on Thursday for suspicion of misdemeanor charges of possessing child pornography. John Bain Chekal, who is 49, was released from Berkeley's jail later last week, which is standard protocol for misdemeanor offences according to the police. Now, the investigation into Bain Chekal began after the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children received a tip about child pornography from an online account, according to the Berkeley police spokesman. The US Department of Homeland Security, the Concord Police Department, and members from Contra Costa County's District Attorney Office and also the Sheriff Office assisted in the investigation. Quite a mouthful there. Norwegian Finance Minister Siv Jensen and her right-wing Progress Party has resigned from the government over a cabinet decision to help bring a woman suspected of being ISIS and affiliated to it back home to Norway. And the resignation robs the Conservative Prime Minister Erna Solberg of her parliamentary majority and could make the country more difficult to govern. But Solberg still plans to remain in office as the head of a minority coalition. Lots of fun and games there. NATO. Subintel. Iraqi officials fear economic collapse if Washington imposes threatened sanctions, including blocking access to a US-based account where Baghdad keeps oil revenues. No surprise there. And that account feeds 90% of the national budget. So this is what the clowns are up to. And Donald Trump was outraged, it is said, by the Iraqi parliament voting on January the 5th to oust foreign forces, which is the US, including 5,000 American troops, 5,200 to be precise, who have helped local soldiers beat back jihadists, it is said, since 2014. Not quite. And if troops were asked to leave, he threatened, we will charge them sanctions like they've never seen before, according to Mr. Trump. But this is an example of how politics works. That account is controlled by the same agency rogue clowns, along with Obama, the Bush group, Netanyahu, and the Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, funny enough. And they're holding the whole country hostage over the oil, because they want it for free. Now, Trump has said several times, but this is how politics works, and this is why I said, going back last year, never believe what is said in public too much. Trump has said several times now he wants to bring home the troops that are fighting abroad, be it Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan. But he is aware of the national security issue surrounding foreign-based American troops returning home. But then the country states, we don't want or need your troops anymore, and then out comes the threat of sanctions, etc. It's two opinions bouncing from one to the other, and it's not indicative of mixed messages, more a case of direct interference. Outgoing Bank of England, the one who's bit the dust, Governor Mark Carney said central banks globally, listen closely, are getting close to running out of tools. I think there's plenty of tools in there already. Should they need to tackle another serious economic downturn. And he said, it's generally true that there is much less ammunition for all the major central banks than they previously had. And I'm of the opinion that this situation will persist for some time. He said it's not clear that monetary policy would have sufficient space if it needs to combat anything worse than a conventional recession. Very cleverly worded. Our members will, or regular listeners will get that. And that's a view echoed elsewhere amongst economists and monetary circles. At the European Central Bank, new president, I don't know whether it's male or female, anyway, it's Christine Lagarde, has echoed her predecessor Mario Draghi in urging governments with budgetary space to spend more. They haven't got any, jackass. Zero, nothing. Spend more that you haven't got. Yeah, that worked well for several governments, didn't it? And all nations to make growth-boosting reforms. Well, all nations can boost growth exponentially if clowns like her and organisations like the Bank of England didn't stop blocking the funds coming out. Now, Carney, who will leave the Bank of England in March, was the first foreign-born governor of the 3-century-old institution, who started in 2013 with the intention of shaking up the organisation while gradually normalising monetary policy. He was soon drawn into the political upheaval surrounding the Scottish referendum, Brexit, and also the general elections. I believe Brexit is ending this week, so I'm told. And the bank left its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 0.75% last month, with a minority of the rate setting panel calling for a cut. Now, the final rate decision and fresh round of economic forecasts are scheduled for January the 30th, the day before Britain quits the European Union. This next piece. Highlights what we put out in Clowns in Panic. The head of UBS Group AG's Strategic Development Lab is turning his focus to the, quote, human survivors of the tech invasion, persuading them to understand things will never be the same. Interesting comment. They're going to have to, in the jargon of Silicon Valley's missionaries, which is Langley Clowns, unlearn how they've always operated. And he said it's not just that their software may know their next move before they do. The extinction of an entire way of life is looming. And as Pervez sees it, it's the end of the bonus culture. So it's not a warning just to the people, it's to the leeches in Wall Street, etc. Compensation will be a last frontier in the onslaught of technology on finance. He's moving traders towards electronic systems as the era of legendary gamblers stalking the markets in search of the $100 million payday becomes a distant memory. What's coming is increased bureaucratization, an evolution that renders the individual's judgment less important, and with it the need to reward them as they might once have expected. This is decentralization. And he said, we want to hire people who are less driven by their own bonus and P&L and more by the long-term goal of what the market will look like in, say, 10 years. And the idea that you are responsible for your own destiny has gone. Oh my. It's a team sport, he said. A team sport that only the select few can take part in, as in multi-billionaires. And the moves in that direction are only accelerating. And this came from another story. Coders have been handed the licenses to trade equities at JP Morgan Chase, while their focus of the biggest hiring spree in recent years for Goldman Sachs trading division. Citigroup plans to recruit 2,500 programmers this year. Oops. We'll have more on that later. The competition for talent with companies like Google and Facebook hasn't caused a surge in banker bonuses, and while tech skills are still in high demand, that doesn't always translate to more compensation. Most trader payouts are forecast to remain steady or decline, according to analysis by recruiting firm Options Group. All of that was warned of in the Clowns in Panic show. And if you want more evidence of that, listen to that show. Watch the series Continuing. It's all there. Further evidence of Clowns in Panic. Also, India has more than 560 million internet users, and about 800 million who have hardly any food, all generating data by the terabyte. And it is said soon they will have an unprecedented amount of control over their digital financial footprints, with the ability to decide what to share with whom and for how long. So what that is telling you is banks are going to go and everything will be done online. I hope you understand the implications of that. If you don't, listen to Clowns in Panic. And India's top banks are getting ready to roll out a system that gives consumers access to a wide swathe of their financial data and allows them to share it instantly. Why would they want to do that? Backed by the Reserve Bank of India, it's an ambitious approach that combines privacy protection, that's an illusion, with credit reporting. If it works, it says, it could unlock the credit market for millions of Indians while offering new levels of data security and consumer control. And India's effort is one of a handful of initiatives around the globe to return control of data to consumers, notably with the open banking movement in Europe and Australia. India's approach is unique. It relies on third parties to mediate the often complicated process of information sharing. In other words, echelon. Oops. And so it's so is its target population, which is predominantly poor and as of now excluded from the former banking system. Well, you've got to have money to begin with to be able to bank it. The account aggregator system will be offered by banks and licensed by India's central bank, which will also regulate the data collection and sharing by logging into authorized apps. Users will be able to pull together all kinds of financial data, spending patterns, bill repayments, tax returns, business transactions that they can then choose to share instantly and temporarily in pursuit of loans, investment products, or even insurance. Well, lots of people will fall for that. It's the classic tactic of seducement. Think of the time it could save you and how much easier it'll be. No, that's that word, convenience again. And those words to a critical thinker are a blaring red flag. When they say things like this to seduce you in, it's going to save time and this and that, think differently of how that system or program can be weaponized against us, because then you will get nearer to the truth. In 2016, Harvey Weinstein hired a private intelligence firm to spy on a long list of people, including those accusing him of sexual assault. Now, our show highlighted one particular female doing that in a recent show, and this comes now as another US actress, Annabella Sciorra, of Sopranos fame, has testified in the Harvey Weinstein trial that the film producer pinioned and raped her at her home 25 years ago. Now, this latest private spy that Weinstein paid for is Seth Friedman. And he was posing as a journalist. Well, that shouldn't have taxed his acting abilities too much, should it? And he called high-profile people like actress Rose McGowan to extract information that he then fed back to Weinstein. And he spoke to the BBC in the past week about his work for Weinstein and his thoughts on #MeToo. And the allegations against Weinstein include rape and a sexual assault relating to two unnamed accusers, as well as Annabella Sciorra. And he obviously denies all charges against them and insists that the sexual encounters were consensual. In their world, consensual has a completely different meaning. The technology frequency headphone-based company Bose is now significantly shrinking the number of retail stores it operates because of the dramatic shift, it says, to online shopping. Convenience again, weaponized. And the maker of the high-end electronics said it's closing 119 retail stores worldwide across North America, Europe, Japan and Australia. But it will continue to operate 130 stores throughout China, the United Arab Emirates, India and some Asian countries. You notice the difference? It's that east and west again. Now, 100 of those stores that are going to close are in America. And judging by this piece, there'll be none left here, except for its, wait for it, Amazon online storefront. Are you seeing the pattern here? Now, the closures illustrate the likelihood of another brutal year for the retail industry, and last year US retailers announced 9,302 store closings, a jump of 59% from 2018. You know, this show warned of this 2 or 3 years back. It's all being harvested into the select few, and Amazon is the biggest problem, and yet people still order online from them. There's going to be no jobs left. None. You either work for Amazon or Walmart, or that's it. And if you don't believe that, here's what the analysts have to say. Online sales make up around 16% of retail sales today, but they will rise to 25% by 2026. And the analysts estimated in a research report that could force another 75,000 store closures by 2026. One thing I need to point out, you ever noticed the products of closed down retail stores never go down? Even when an online market is introduced. Now, with less than 100 less storefront shops, which then drastically reduces their overheads, one would think the price of the product would plunge, would it not? But it never happens, does it? Sad story out of New York, and it's not a surprise, given we've covered what's going on in New York, and in particular relating to vaccines. Now, the mother of an 11-year-old Hamburg, New York boy who recently died from flu-related complications doesn't want her son to be remembered as just a statistic, but rather as the wonderful boy he was. In came the vaccine program people and kicked right into gear. Kalani said Luca was sickened with the flu early last week, and by Wednesday, after not seeing any improvement, he was taken to the hospital for fluids. There he was diagnosed with septic shock, and his condition steadily deteriorated, and he later suffered a fatal cardiac arrest, according to his mother. Now, the kicker to this rather sad story is Luca was vaccinated for flu on December the 12th. And it's up to all parents in New York to take your own responsibility. F the system and their threats. Your obligation is to your child. This is what happens. Final piece before we go into sub-op-ed. If you wish to know what's going on about the impeachment of Virginia, or the latest version of, well, you're all going to die. In China and certain viruses, essentially you're missing the point. Acquiring details of and on those three is a waste of time. The first is a fake distraction program that has zero chance of coming to fruition. The second was a potential false flag event that failed again spectacularly. And the third is their now regular version of let's create fear and corral people into using up their expensive and deadly vaccines, as we've just heard. And that is about as much as attention I wish to pay any of those events. They're all designed to distract you from the more real and now tangible events that are going on behind the scenes and in the public. You know, all it does is it gives the treasonous portal people the chance to blab bollocks all day, every day. And heaven forbid any one of them thinks for themselves. Like bots, they're incapable. Sub-op-ed. I warned that the alt media would go into meltdown as far back as December 2018. Randy and I warned of it earlier. And one of the comments I said in the show is they will expose themselves and each other. And this is further proof. Well, first we're going to give some background to it. This person said Kim, the trustee, was a nobody. She was not the trustee. Denied that the trust existed. Then admitted Kim was the trustee, but then balanced it with Kim has stolen all the trust funds and is a fraud and a criminal. This person also questioned Kim's love life and personality, describing her as cold, all whilst working for Langley too. Kim reached out twice to work with this person, and this person decided at regular intervals she would rather lie and trash Kim than work together. So that is the background. Now listen to this short piece taken from an email. Welcome to the world of Anna von Reitz. Quote, as I have recently discovered, Kim and I are cousins, members of the same family. Oh dear. I suppose the only way I can explain this is in terms of genetic inheritance, leading to proclivities and abilities to perceive things that otherwise cannot be explained. We have never known each other in this life, and have had no reason to suspect such a connection. She went on, and here's the key line. As you have observed, both Kim and I have blocked the accounts, coming from two completely different standpoints. Oops. And there you have it. Anna von Reitz and the group she is connected to has been blocking the accounts. To turn around and state Kim is blocking them as well is childlike behaviour at best. But she did it as well. That would be a no. Why would Kim block the accounts if the only way that she gets paid or the projects get started, which Kim has committed to, is through releasing the accounts, not blocking them? And quite frankly, that is a ridiculous claim to make, but also indicative. She went on, and no, we aren't that opposed in what we want to have happen here, but that is hard to accomplish when we can't seem to sit down and talk as equals. Kim did sit down with her twice. She chose to try and cheat the trust by requesting funding to then send that funding money to the Vatican and then onto fake Chinese elders by requesting 1/3 of America's in-ground resources. She went on. She seems to think I'm some sort of low-life lackey, and for my part, no. She said, actually, Kim doesn't think that. Anna has done that all by herself. By repeatedly demeaning and spreading known lies she knows all too well about Kim at every opportunity. So no, Kim doesn't think you're a low-life lackey. You act that way. Big difference. She then goes on, talks about working together, and then throws little hammers in, or so she thinks, like this. Her, Kim, status based on being Marduk's favourite is no big recommendation. Really, Anna? This is the same Marduk that tried to kill Kim in the Kremlin. Oops. Some favourite that. Yet again making up barbs to throw at her and try and discredit her. Well, to me, Anna, that looks all very lame when the real truth comes forward, as it has done repeatedly. So you can make out you want to work with her, and we should come together, yet still continue to throw out lies. And I'll ask the question, how is that bringing people together, Anna? She goes on. So we both have to overcome those antipathies and associated assumptions. Kim worked alongside M, for those who don't know, Marduk, with no idea who or what he was. Anna works directly for Langley 2 and AAIA, and still does, knowingly. But things are not working out too well for you or your paymasters, are they? Hence this letter. She went on. If you thought she hadn't put her foot in her mouth, she's enough. No. Besides removing the blocks, there is the issue of having authority to open them. I, Anna, know the bank trustee heir who has all the information and all the powers of attorney. Wrong. The trustee, Kim, has the power to open them just like the predecessor did. It was only one then and only one now. And your trustee heir, you claimed, was the Dark Prince. Well, he no longer exists. So how's that going to work now, Anna? She went on. He is willing to work with me specifically to get the job done from both sides of the table. So then all we have to do is come to a common understanding and stop blocking each other. As I have made abundantly clear, I don't like banking. To me, it's a child's game gone horribly awry. The fastest, cleanest and least painful route out of this quagmire of deceit is what is most appealing to me, and I'm sure to everyone involved. End of quote. If people have any doubts the trust is not making progress, this letter confirms it in its full form. An admittance of they have failed to stop Kim being who she is, and also an admittance that Anna and her Langley 2 counterparts have been blocking the funds making it to the accounts. And as usual, we get the predictable deflection narratives thrown in. It's called passing the buck. It and they failed. So if we are to be believing her that she is related to Kim in some way, where is the full apology for the plethora of nasty barbs she has thrown consistently at Kim for the last 2 years, who is now allegedly one of her own family members? Here are the facts. Kim is the trustee, the only main trustee, just like her predecessor. Yes, he had to use Anna's terms as it is indicative of how he thought of all of them. Lackeys. He used lackeys as the other trustees. Why? To fulfill his desire to get all the assets quicker. Nothing more, nothing less. That's why you had all these family trustees, Mandelas, Gaddafis and all kinds of other, Marcos, etc. Rothschilds. Kim is not the owner of the trust or the assets. We want to make that quite clear. She was employed to be the guardian of the trust. After the people that Anna works with and others looted it all to fulfill your own families and groups as people of special importance above everybody else. All of you failed to guard the treasures, which is why Kim's there now. And under Kim and her team, guardianship will stop the previous set of shenanigans and will not be repeated. The assets will be shared as equally as possible, with the desire to lift everyone on this planet towards a better and more prosperous life, not the select few living at everyone's expense, of which Anna von Reitz and her family were prevalent in, the Habsburgs. Now, Kim, for her part, is willing to speak to anyone who flies straight. Now, to date, not one of them have approached her via phone or in-person meetings were prepared to fly straight. None of them, including Ms. von Reitz. And all they want to do is control Kim and also the trust. But none of you have the right to control anyone. You can't even control yourselves. Where were you cowards when M was running it? Why didn't you control him? No, he controlled you all like little puppets, giving you worthless pieces of paper to enhance your shallow lives, whilst he stole this planet's assets. And you lot gave it all to him. Fact. And as for controlling Kim, to use a popular Kim term, I promise you that's not happening. Fly straight, the lot of you, and let's all move forward together. Former Pope Benedict wants his name removed as a co-author of a controversial book on the issue of priestly celibacy. What an illusion that is. And the book, From the Depths of Our Hearts, oh dear, is due to be published in France, and excerpts were released at the weekend, angering some Roman Catholic scholars who said Benedict risked destabilising the reigning Pope Francis. These people have no heart, none, and are a vast part of why this planet is in a mess. What next? He wants to it removed that he was a former Nazi in the SS. Oh my. Destabilised Pope Francis, is said, who was a gun runner for the junta. Or will it upset previous Pope who sold cyanide to the Nazis? There's your last three popes. Gun runner, SS officer, and someone who sold cyanide to the Nazis. And the sooner all people see this organisation as beyond evil, the better this planet will be. And no, that doesn't mean switching religions either. They're all one and the same. All of them. But don't take my word for it. What I'm asking you to do is research for yourself. You can listen to From Russia with Love again. It's all there. The evidence is all around you and right in your face. But more importantly, which is what these religions have attempted and achieved to date, to stifle is, everything was within you. That's what it's all about. What are we doing? Perhaps we'll leave that for another week. Now, here's a mini report from Brendan in Australia of things that are really going on there. And he said the fires in certain parts of Australia are real bad, and the firefighters do need better funding. And he was asking for support for them. And but what he did say is, don't fall for the fear-porn climate change SIOP narrative that is using fake images. And he sent an image that the Portal people media had put out to sell the idea that the whole of Australia is on fire, and it's because of CO2-driven climate change. No. But this is the fear-mongering, he said, they're using to continue shoving the UN globalist agenda and mind-effery down our throats. And relatively speaking, the actual percentage of land surface on fire is actually tiny. No less devastating for those directly affected, of course, but overall it's rather small, thankfully. And he said, say no to the anti-science, irrational fear porn pushing the bogus CO2-driven global warming narrative. Being informed is being armed, he said. Now, one thing I need to say to our members and listeners who are new to understand this clearly is Kim does not have the time to deal with or discuss any projects in any country. That is not her role. You know, that is the equivalent of ringing the White House and asking to speak to Mr. Trump about things. It's not happening. And I wish people would understand that Kim has 209 countries to look after. Several agencies, military, heads of state and government leaders to speak to at various times. That is the level she is at. Now, she already works far too much and far too long per day from the above list. Plus people sending her messages not to ask how she is, but when's the funds coming out. And people must have a better understanding of hers and our situation. And the same applies to me. People sending or requesting to me to go over their proposals or project ideas, or asking for one-on-one private calls with either me or Kim. And as much as I and Kim also would love to be engaging more people on one-on-one, we just don't have the time. You know, I receive at least 25 messages and emails each week that all start with the same line. I know you're busy, but I need you to read this, watch this, or answer these questions. And when I don't respond in full, people get annoyed or testy. But a bit of thought and consideration at times is required here. We only have so many hours in a day. We have little to no life already. Now, the truth is now I can only get to look at the emails that are sent in maybe 2 or 3 times a week. It's not daily. And it's an hour here or an hour there. So watching a 25 to 90 minute video you've sent for my consideration is just not possible in the current climate. You know, I hope you all understand that. Moscow is to create the most extensive collection of World War II documents, which will be open to all persons anywhere, to once and for all, quote, shut the filthy mouth, unquote, of those seeking to rewrite history for short-term gains, according to President Putin this week. Oops. And he said any person, Russian or non-national, will be able to access the archive, including through a website resource, and the ultimate goal is to debunk any disinformation about the most devastating conflict in human history. And Mr. Putin pledged during a meeting with veterans of the Great Patriotic War held in St. Petersburg on Saturday, and said the creation of the centre would leave no chance to those willing to distort the truth about war for their own political needs. My comment on this is, I guess the From Russia with Love series went and goes further than people imagined. Now that centre, once it's open, could get real interesting. Because if he puts out the right documents, it's going to expose the real problem of what happened just over 100 years ago in Russia and who were involved. Our members already know. The rest of the world doesn't. Then we got this story which we've covered previously and warned of the dangers. And here's further evidence now that's come forward. The psychedelic powers of a traditional Amazonian plant medicine called Ayahuasca are attracting more and more tourists. It's said to bring spiritual enlightenment and to help with addiction, depression and trauma. But a string of allegations suggest there is a darker side to the ayahuasca scene. Rebecca, who's in the story, says the healer sexually abused her and coerced her into sexual acts, and said, because he was a shaman, I thought he had a moral superiority in a sense, and I trusted him. Now, after she was abused, she left the centre and the country, and she said, I booked a flight and got the hell out of there. But she was left with a tangle of painful emotions, disgust, repulsion, betrayal, and also confusion, as well as to why a guide would do this, why a teacher would do this, and why they would exploit their power like that. Because that's what it's merely there for. Sorry. Now, Rebecca's alleged abuser is still the head shaman at his centre, which gets 5-star ratings on his review sites. And she said he's still there, and she's deeply angered by the situation. And during the interview said there are other centres that I know of as well that are still operating. There have been multiple women who have been sexually abused in these centres. Now, it's not just the centres she was talking about in South America. It was also stated that experiences of sexual abuse seem to be widespread in this world, and we've heard numerous allegations against numerous healers and read many testimonies of sexual abuse via online forums. One name that comes up repeatedly is Guillermo Aravello, a well-known healer who has been honoured by the Peruvian Congress for his work on sustainable development, very UN term there, who also travelled to Canada many times, no surprise there either, and there was reports of sexual abuse of a woman in her 40s who the report called as Anna. But this is another story that adds further proof that has been put out by this show. These so-called spiritual retreats are not for the purpose of enlightenment at all. As we discovered with the Tibetan and Hindu retreats, it's riddled with potions of poison, sexual abuse and control and abuse elements. Disturbing chants or mantras, all done in front of mandalas, that the average person, including these shamans I might add, have no idea what the intentions are behind them. None whatsoever. And the same applies with other aspects like tantric and yoga. Hello, I'm a multi-titled yoga expert. Okay, fine. Question: do you teach your students to shield before doing the yoga practice? And we're back to cricket again, followed by, who are you to ask me? I'm the expert, I've studied this for blah blah years. Exactly would be my response. Because the problem is the people who taught them were not fully aware either, or in on it. And it's the blind leading the blind. And essentially these ceremonies that you're taking part in, you have no idea what you're getting into. You might think you do, you don't. Well, it says on the tin it's spiritual. But what is spiritual? Well, it's about enlightenment, okay? What is enlightenment? Well, it's improving the self. So, if it's improving the self, why do you need others or potions to do it? Because you don't. Ayahuasca is not something to be recommended by anyone. It's a poison, and it makes you sick temporarily. But the real sickness it leads to can last the rest of your lives. Spirit host possession by dark force entities. And those that choose to ignore that advice are foolhardy in the extreme. They'll tell you, these centres and these Hindu and Tibetan groups, you need others to do the spiritual work. Why did he tell you that? To keep you in the externalization system is why. It's no different to religion. You need them to become enlightened. Bollocks you do. Chanting words, you have no idea what they mean and even less of their intentions, particularly when most have zero knowledge of spellcasting, chant on mandalas, when I proved in the From Russia with Love 8 piece, the main mandala in India is a representation of a sacrifice humans centre. And you're all chanting on it? That invokes their fake gods. All hail Shiva, our great god, who wants to come down, kill our fellow men, women and children for him. Sacrifice. Like Angkor Wat, another sacrifice centre. Cambodia. And yet, we're told that Shiva protects them. I don't think so. There goes that common sense thinking again. And a lack of thinking and questioning on everything has damaged us all. Here comes Shiva, who turns up like a helicopter blade with several sets of arms, and no one asks, where did the extra arms come from? Is that human? Or is it some chimera mix with a bug? And it's like the talking snake story. If an Indian person goes to the doctor and says, I just saw some guy come down out of the sky riding an elephant and he has 4 sets of arms and spoke to me and told me I'm the chosen one. What happens next? You get locked up and put on severe medication and called a conspiracy theorist. And yet millions follow that ridiculous narrative and believe in it. Wake up, people. They tell you what Shiva is all about right in your faces, and yet so many ignore it. Shiva is known as the destroyer. This song is about Shiva. Well, the title is anyway. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and welcome back. We're into the intel now, and I'm going to read part of what was in the last show, because some people missed it, with it being of a Friday, and also we ran the From Russia with Love, and then add new bits to it. Now, the planetary alignment plan failed. Another one of the clown games. And then they rolled on to the next event, which was financial. Welcome to the 15th. And no deep state pay again. Yet again, they were waiting for the Fed door to open, and yet again, for what is now an embarrassing 30 years of trying, it failed. And then the bombshell from Russia took place, and the whole cabinet of Russian government resigned, except Putin. Now, this sent the agencies of the former Five Eyes and other top brass into total panic mode. But this was not the Russian government who resigned, but the Russian deep state who resigned. Now, we knew this was coming, as we got word they had given the Rothschilds et al. A final date for the payouts, and it failed again. Now, the ultimate was made quite a few weeks back, and from our standpoint, we just wasn't sure if they would walk the walk when the D-Day came. Well, they did. And this created the agencies in America to go into full panic mode. The Fed also. They had just got news that their repo bubble is completely imploding, as we warned it would, and we suspect that they will back down on certain trade deals, some of which had taken place and some didn't. And they also said you may well see before the end of this month high-profile resignations here and elsewhere. We are aware of the names involved, but we will not be releasing them in case it jeopardises anything. It's not a secret, it's operational. Resignations or firings then appeared next in Norway, home of the NATO clans. Hello, Mr. Robert David Steele. And said to be about links to ISIS, and that may well be the case, but it was not the primary cause. Then last Wednesday, clowns, which was which date? The 15th, same date. It's always connected. The clowns were trying to run their new super duper extra special quantum system, and everything was set to happen, which was last Wednesday, the 15th, same as their failed payout date. And it all ended in tears. Servers and other operational rooms were rendered obsolete. Not fried this time, but turned into dust. And this I can now reveal was in Paraguay, under a certain bush ranch. Oh my. The clown elites and special groups, as they call themselves, were also trying several other programs that would have affected the price of food globally upwards and sent energy prices skyrocketing. Other plans of theirs would have closed off whole or all sections of the internet, along with several other non-thought-out programs and proposals which would have tipped the whole planet into chaos, including themselves, I might add. And that's what happens when you don't think properly. Anyway, all of them were averted last week, and the question remains to everyone and the clans is, what happens next? Now, following certain groups and their latest attempt to trick, seduce, steal or control from Kim and the Trust that failed last week, all hell broke loose on all top levels of the old system. And last weekend brought hasty meetings from people all around the globe. They were all there, which started at 10 a.m. Saturday morning and went right through to Sunday evening. On Monday morning, that same meeting continued until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which was just 30 minutes before Mr. Trump left for Switzerland and the Davos meeting. Now, those meetings involved top brass from several countries, some of which of the debates were interesting, but there was also the usual self-serving aspect that was prevalent, but also self-preservation situation of which we have a solution for, which I will bring up in the op-ed section. Then the UK Cabinet, which had been mentioned in December, was confirmed and was banned from attending the Rothschilds' country orders retreat, better known as the Davos meeting. Now, this could mean one of two things, or also both. The MI5-6, which runs the UK government along with the Black Freemasons out of the City of London, have turned the war on the Rothschilds group because they are members of the Order of the Black Sun cult. Or they got wind of the Rothschilds trying to take money off other countries, none of which have any, in an attempt to stay in control of all the Commonwealth countries. So what was it that started this latest panic, which will not go away, I might add? Well, apart from failing to hack the system several hundred times, including that clown in San Francisco, the loss of another main computer in Paraguay, the failure to deliver the RV after another cut-off date was put forward, their delusional planetary alignment plans failing on the 10th and 11th of January. The biggest reason was when the trust called in all of the debt with the central bank bonds. All groups now are declared responsible for the debt, be it the military, the agencies, the Fed, and all the central banks. All of it was borrowed by the Rothschilds or the Black Sun in their name. And no one has the ability to pay it all back. Paying even some of it back would bankrupt every single country, every bank also, Central Reserve or otherwise. The relevant groups to us are now getting very edgy. By relevant groups to us, I'm talking about the military, the agencies, and in some ways, some of the banks also. Because although their top rank people followed the Rothschilds clan or the Black Sun, a lot of the minions don't. They just want to be paid. And most of them haven't been paid for some time now, as we've been hearing at regular intervals for the past 8 to 12 months, as they were all told to wait for the RV to pay out, which will never happen in a million years of Drake's 2 weeks predictions, which is like never. Now, the light at the end of the tunnel came into view come Monday morning. The factions are breaking, and as forecasted, they would turn on each other and within their own ranks, as their let's look after us mode kicked in. Now, eventually, we will arrive at a point of mutual interest. Ours is far longer than theirs. And I mean mutual. And yes, we will look after all of your issues, but we want guarantees that if we garnish you out of the trust, you will devote all your time going forward to looking after all of the people. And I mean all. Your harvesting program is over and it's not coming back. This next line goes into the next piece of intel. Coders have been handed licenses to trade equities at JP Morgan, whilst they're the focus of the biggest hiring spree in years for Goldman Sachs. Citigroup plans to recruit 2,500 programmers this year. The Black Sun and the Rothschilds are still attempting to control the banks via anonymous, or so they thought, text messages being sent to their cronies inside these banks, who are then instructed to do everything from intercept funds, steal wire transfers, shut down systems, block or close accounts, delay or reject government officials and auditors, and much more. Block government officials. And you thought your government was all so powerful. Wrong. These this is from Kim. These anonymous systems are being dismantled, and any person found to be still following those orders will be removed. Do you hear that? And this is why JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs are hiring code people. Code people means hackers, just saying. And the hiring of people from IBM, or IWASM, and other devious groups, and they are hoping it will turn the tide in their favour. We promise you, that's not happening. And the message from Kim is, this will not stop the process. Last piece of intel before we have a music break. Tuesday brought the Trump speech. And you may have noticed some familiar lines and narratives in that speech. Not only from the THI shows, but also from Kim and the Trust as well. And a refreshing signal and nod to going forward in a better way. Echoes of no fear, no pessimism, bright futures, the lower end peoples being lifted up, references to other countries supporting their own people, coming together, amongst other things, and was refreshing to hear a leader speak in that way, regardless of where it came from. It is time. Trump also mentioned the 190 judges being trained in constitutional law. Pondered deeply on the implications and potential outcomes that will bring us. All of it has previously been revealed within our shows. All in all, it was a very enlightening and empowering speech. But as usual, the portal people, which is the media for those new, spat out their venom with comments like, Trump threatens Europe with fresh tariffs in Davos, deepening a rift with, quote, long-time US allies, unquote. Newsflash, the US has no allies. It's just a group of psychopaths in each country causing division, death and destruction for their now deceased gods and overlords that have done everything to cripple and take down this country and its people. And the message to them, your time is over. And a new beginning for the all is about to unfold. These two songs says it all. The first was the old way. The second is the new way. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. Now we mentioned in the intel before the music break of a particular underlying issue that has been discussed at top levels and was discussed in the 3-day meeting that took place Saturday through Monday evening. Now, it involves several factors of what has gone on previously. Elements of peoples and groups not being paid, elements of thievery on a mass scale that could have major geopolitical issues for America as a country. When many other countries really find out what has gone on globally and the theft and skullduggery are all apportioned mainly back to one country, and that country is America. The fear amongst the top people is that several groups or countries may rise up and attack America because of what went on in the past. It is a big, real and serious problem that requires as much discourse as possible to provide the necessary solutions of what is potentially a global crisis. Now, one of the backgrounds into this is there has been the non-compete plan from 1976. I would suggest all in me we get my favourite GIF ready. You're not going to like it. Where the global elite designated companies, corporations and conglomerates to corner all and every market in what was essentially a ramp up of the harvesting plan of the former trustee. And these select companies were in every field of commerce, but let's just name a few of them that are known. The likes of Johnson & Johnson, Bayer, Microsoft, Go Ogle, Aramco, Walmart, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Halliburton, Bechtel and Northrop Grumman, amongst several others. The deal was all these selected companies received their materials of whatever enterprise they were involved in at 50% of cost. Cue GIF. Not 50% of the final cost, no, but the raw materials at 50% of the saleable cost value. And this is what destroyed the farming industry in particular in this country alone. This gave them enormous power to corner all markets, not just in America, but globally. Because if you are a corner shop owner, for example, and the direct cost of bread is $1 a loaf, Walmart got the same loaf for 50 cents. How can you compete with that? Well, the answer is you are never meant to compete, only to lose your business and jobs, so the harvesting elites only prospered. The same applies with oil. All the certain designated oil companies received their barrels of oil at 50% less than competitors. So they got oil at, say, $25 a barrel and sold it for $50 to $70 a barrel or more to everyone else. And you would think that that type of gain was enough. But not for these parasitic psychopaths, it wasn't. They then set about stealing the oil for free out of Iraq and Iran, plus other oil-producing countries in that region. Their only costs then was the shipping of it to various ports, be it China via Pakistan, which we stopped, or Houston, Texas via Saudi Arabia-based company Aramco, who got the sole contract to process all the stolen oil, which is why Saudi is protected, which was then shipped to Venezuela, and Chavez shipped the free oil to Houston. The Bush Group. And this is why America was getting so-called cheap oil from Venezuela, until Chavez and the Bush Group had a big fallout. And we all know what happens next when that happens, as JFK found out himself to his own cost. The Bush group then went on to building another refinery, this time on the Mississippi, to cut other people out of the deals. The Bush group Langley 2, along with Obama, Langley 3, Netanyahu, and the Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran, yes, Iran, of all countries, Iran, are all in on this stolen oil deal, even though the same four were getting it 50% of cost. Iran, the great boogeyman country to the portal people, and yet here we have two ex-American presidents, along with the AIPAC lobbyist darling Netanyahu, all doing deals together to line their own pockets at the expense of their countries and peoples. Sickening levels of greed that the majority of which stems out of America. But what the world needs to know is countries are not relevant in global level criminality. All countries have been used as pawns. It's no different to the past of blaming the British and Dutch countries. They were both ran by corporations known as the Indies Tea Companies and has zero to do with Britain or Holland. The same applied with the Roman invasions. That had zero to do with Italy and or Italians or Alexandria and Greece either. We can go back further and mention Genghis Khan, which is Cohen, and the priest class operating out of Mongolia. The same applied to Germany and the Nazis. Every single one of those countries were used by the hidden psychopathic controllers to manipulate life, the countries and the planet into turmoil. So the message to all the top brass in all the countries taking part in that is, don't blame the countries. The blame lies with the former system and its harvesting operations. So here is the solution part of fixing some of this global crisis at hand. First off, all militaries will be paid what they are owed or due, providing they walk away from the Rothschild clan and also the Order of the Black Sun. Your role will be to look after the people within your own country. Each country would then be responsible for their own people, which is what Trump referenced on Tuesday. Not alleged superpower countries, which is a myth, lording over them under the banner of protection, like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and several other examples. All countries would become autonomous. The relevant militaries and armed forces would then go after all Rothschilds and Black Sun assets and operations. We would then sell off all their ill-gotten gains, all of which was looted out of the trust, and those proceeds would then go towards paying back the people within your own militaries, mercenaries even, and other agents, with a portion of the proceeds to go back to the trust. You will be funded as part of your budget with no payback to the trust for these operations. Secondly, let's use the various one example. We could list hundreds. Microsoft centres and Bill Gates and his foundation. All of his knowledge was stolen from other companies. It's not his own. Split that group into several smaller enterprises and allow IT entrepreneurs to take over with their innovations. Not Palo Alto and the rogue CIA and NSA groups. They've done enough damage. And restructure all their companies into a cooperative business ventures under the guise of either directly or indirectly with the People's Club, be it into the foundation or the use of the Cooperative Business Model Directive. This then protects all the jobs. Assets sold off or ill-gotten gains from them will again be used to pay off those debts that America allegedly owes other countries, and a portion of funds will go back to the trust. This will ensure no average person within those countries or companies will lose their jobs, but they will be trained to operate in a different way than the past, of which all companies failed. All of them. The ones that didn't only thrived by massive cheating and losing out of the trust in the past or the non-compete plan. The next stage will be what is known as the families. Again, largely ill-gotten gains based on favourable deals and contracts, deceiving of the people and the countries. Remove their ill-gotten gains also and disperse accordingly. The idea that 10 so-called bloodline or special families owns 72% of American land alone is not conducive to moving forward in a sharing-based world. Take it off them and give it back to the people. No one person, group or country owns anything on this planet. Currently, though, it's all owned by the trust. But the trustee, as the guardian, not the owner of the trust, wants to share it all out equally to everybody. No ifs, no buts. The idea that some group owns the oil, diamonds or gold or any other asset is the old way. That failed us all, including the so-called chosen ones, special families and certain dragon groups. All assets on this planet belongs to every single person or being on or in it. Yes, companies can be compensated for mining, say the diamonds, but that's all. They should not own the said mines. That belongs to us all. And once people globally understand that and deliver it, this world will become a much better place for it. No more fighting over land, countries, oil, diamonds, drug or fake religious ideologies. It all disappears. The military of the future should be a global-based military with no one country having any control, and whose sole task is to defend this planet only. So there is a brief outline how we wish to see the world correct the ills of the past. And not one word was mentioned over using violence. It doesn't require violence to carry out the above. Natural law, executive orders, old contracts revealed, and proof of their theft is all within the Fulcrum files and could be made available to you all. There is no need to fight countries anymore. All of it was an illusion to begin with. Let's do a 180, correct the ills, and come together in peace and harmony. It's no easy task, we know. But where there's a will, there's always a way. We are ready to roll. The key question is now, are you? Everybody in our group now knows about the cooperative business model, and I'm still to do the video graphic version on the website, but time is not always on my side. And you're also aware it is also a social and psychological practice as well. But what if we rolled that out into a government structure also? How could it work? Can it be implemented? In what format? Well, the answer is yes, it can. It would end the two-party illusion that one is different from the other. They're not. It would end the isms that has plagued society as they defend the illusion that one ism is better than the other. They're not. All the isms and branches of government, be it socialism, republicanism, democrat, monarchism, all come under the banner of communism and Zionism. All of them. And you are deluded if you think you are a republic, monarchy, despot, or have a constitution. The facts shown in our show alone states it's not real. For those new to our show, communism has zero to do with Russians, or Chinese, or Vietnamese for that matter, and everything to do with the Zionist movement operating programs of mutual failure for us all on behalf of their so-called gods. Obama was trained in communism. Yes, he is a Muslim. Why would a Muslim become a communist? Because it's got nothing to do with religion or what country you came from. Communism in their format is everywhere and knows no boundaries. And when people really grasp that fact, then we can get on as equal people and fix the issues without the racism or media-led hatred of peoples and countries that has no basis within your own experience of these people. How stupid is it that you hate an entire peoples based on a 30 to 52-inch screen with animated people inside of it reading out scripts that are not even using their own words or opinions? The sheer concept of that is mind-boggling. And yet it shows how easily people can be brainwashed and mind-controlled. Mainly by these same Zionists is why. They run the media and the magazines. And this is also how we end up with movie stars or game show hosts as your representatives. Not presidents, as most people think. Your current president is, at this time, the head CEO of the USA Inc. Corporation. Big difference. The leader of the country going forward is who is best represents the people and works for and by the people. Leaders should never be selected based on how much money they can scrounge out of the people via donations either, or based on being rich or some family-based hierarchy system, or be decided by rogue agencies within our own borders either. Hello, Langley. So how can we implement a cooperative government? It's simple. We pick people who will serve the people in their respective fields of operations. You cannot expect one man or woman to be involved in every micro decision making. It's more of an oversight job than being immersed in it for the leader. A government cannot be ran by lobbyists, Israeli or otherwise, neither by banks, financial institutions, agencies or exterior-based think tank organisations. The levels of interference and clownery is beyond obscene currently. The government will be much easier to run if all the interference, backdoors, siphoning and lobbyists are removed. Then people can make cooperative decisions with input from the all that is open and accessible to the all. Now, to make it more accessible, select groups of different age groups in each state could be organised and set up a committee to ascertain what are the key elements the general public is interested in fixing, improving, implementing or introducing, and be fed directly back to the politicians to vote or implement. Then the people, which have dissolved their own responsibility and handed all the flack over to the politicians, are then taking an active interest and participating the way they should be. Politicians should not be a private, rich, elite lawyers' club like it is now. And even those in it do not understand how it works. Militaries, agencies, elites, rich and bloodline families making decisions for us has been an unmitigated disaster. All of them failed spectacularly, I might add. Their inability to operate anything correctly is there for all to see now. Completely incapable of making a common sense decision at any time, never mind in a timely manner. But that doesn't and shouldn't negate our own responsibility in that either. We, the people, have neglected that responsibility badly, and it's cost us heavily. That has got to change. A non-divisive, fair, transparent government operating in a cooperative way, not only at home but abroad also, is not only deliverable but essential for the progress of this planet and our species. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. Well, a show of common sense has broke out. Well, I never. And we're going to go into some more. The piece we did earlier, the news item, and the vast wealth everywhere. Not so much now, but as stated in the From Russia with Love series, every single colour or culture has a few that steal it all for themselves, and none look after their own colour. And that is a fact. Now, given the Rewrite History programme perpetrated on the world of how all the whites stole everything off the blacks and how all the black people were slaves and repressed, and then you have people like Obama, the woman in Angola mentioned earlier, Santos, the Mandelas, yes, the Mandelas, as history about them is sugar-coated beyond sickly. Nelson was a trustee for M and did nothing with the trust money to help his people, just line their own pockets. Like the Saud family, and even the various famous, so-called famous anyway, TV and sports people who are black and different colours. What have they done for their own people? Nothing. The majority just flashed their wealth and alleged superiority over the masses. Obama got in America as the great hope for the black people, and he did what for them in 8 years? Nothing. And what this proves is, no matter which colour, country or political system you choose, none will be beneficial for and by the people. And what this also reveals is, it doesn't matter which colour you select. All those differing peoples of colour, once they attain levels of wealth, fame or status, abandon their own colour. Never mind others. And that has to stop. Because that is a complete replica of the so-called elites system. And this is why we the people have to come together. You will not do that being represented by a political party or ideology, a religion, a colour of skin, or your created for you culture either. We come together as people who care and drop all the labels and the bullshit that they've fed us. It's the only way forward. Shame those people in their communities who sit there with millions and billions in the bank while their own colour, be it white, black, yellow or brown, all live in mass poverty. News piece that came in, which can be in part intel, but it's been thrown into the op-ed pieces. A mysterious deep space event that could have stretched and squeezed Earth last week, it was said. Astronomers observed a split-second, not quite, burst of gravitational waves on January the 14th, but they can't figure out precisely where the burst came from. These waves are disturbances, they said, in space-time. Where did we hear that recently? Shall we do another riddle? Best not, I'll probably get strangled. That are generally, they said, caused by accelerated masses, such as black holes or neutron stars colliding with each other. However, astronomers are unsure because this particular burst didn't last very long. And in addition, gravitational waves usually change in frequency over time, according to Andy Howell, a scientist at Los Cumbres Observatory Global Telescope Network. And the burst still seems a little too short for what we expect from the collapse of a massive star, he said. And he went on and says, on the other hand, we've never seen a star blowing up in gravitational waves before, so we don't really know what it would look like. Proof of the inorganic black hole being removed? I wonder. Coming soon, mysterious cloud hurtling towards Earth. Oh wait, they've already mentioned that as well, and they didn't understand that either. They won't. Perhaps their next piece will be, they will reveal, is a new star in the sky, we suspect. Although the new explosion of light that will be seen by the naked eye may well come from Betelgeuse in Orion. It's going supernova. Next piece. I did a show on Sunday which made some powerful statements in many ways, and they may not have been received well by some or many Americans due to being brainwashed by the system to worship the US military, despite the atrocities they committed, which has got nothing to do with the American people directly, which is why I did that solutions piece earlier. But they are responsible the same as all other people in countries whose militaries went to war when they were never attacked. And we all fell for the treasonous anti-human media spin. Hammer point 1. The people were in part responsible for the wars. This boogeyman over there doesn't like us, we hear. They hate our freedoms. What bloody freedoms, I may ask? Oh, the same freedoms where we all get spied on. And America has so much freedom, they implement the Patriot Act on the people for source sakes. They took away the Constitution, applied a just us system, not justice, robbed taxes off us under false pretences, and then sent it all to Switzerland. So our government then has no money to run the country, and then has to borrow 40% of every dollar spent at a further cost of 10 cents per dollar. Freedom's my ass. So all people are responsible for not doing your own research and allowing the portal people to research for you and tell you the biggest steaming pile of horse manure in history. And yet so many all went along with it. Hammer point 2. The people were responsible for allowing other people's scripts and not researching themselves and doing something about it. Every war in the last 110 years, I could go back further, but let's just deal with people who were alive at that time. But there's still a few. Every war was to serve an agenda, create money for these psychopaths, run clandestine operations in the various theatres. They are called theatres for a reason. It's a staged play, is why. Then came hammer point number 3, which provoked this piece. The badges of honour. So many proudly wear and celebrate. And yes, I know that upsets quite a few, including those of the top brass. But the reason it upsets people is what I said, although brutal in its delivery, was 100% true, and all of you deep down know it. Badges for killing people. Let that sink in. Let that really sink in. And this is how far humanity has fell, that people would celebrate having medals for killing somebody, and not just a few, oh no. Hundreds of millions globally in the last 100 years alone. Again, let that sink in. Whole peoples wiped out, and for what? Freedoms? Religions? They don't like us? Newsflash, you have no freedoms. It's fake and illusion. Religions are fake and illusion. They don't like us. When they learn the truth that the US military, as an example, is not representative of America, the country, or its people, that will rarely be fake and illusion. Because they're not. US military is owned by the Rothschilds, with some discourse that the Vatican are claiming they own them since the 1600s. Fine, you can pay all the money that the American people have paid for the last 400 years for military expenses back to the American people then, if you own them. And then we'll go and create a new one. Look at THI as an example. People from over 100 countries now represented. All cultures, religions and colours all coming together. Including the so-called boogeymen, Russians. Ooh. Alleged German Nazis, which is also fake. And if you're new to this show, go and listen to all of my From Russia with Love series. The truth oozes throughout all of it. The Nazis were not Germans. But badges of honour should never be given to anyone for killing another person. That is devolution in terms of our species. They are badges of dishonour. And the only justification for killing another person is in extreme self-defence mode. All else is wanton death programs for the harvesters. Hammer point 4 is a repeat of 3, so it sinks in. Badges for killing people is wrong on every level. Let's look through clear overview eyes, shall we, and take countries out of the equation. Because the old system was not interested in countries. We mentioned that earlier. Only using and subverting those particular people within those fake lines on a piece of paper. Those lines were put there to divvy up the land parcels for each greedy harvester. Nothing more and nothing less. If countries are real, where is Yugoslavia now? Where is Czechoslovakia, or Tartaria, or South Holland, or Rhodesia, or Ceylon, to name but a few? Or the former principalities, kingdoms, and several People's Republic countries, go and check them out yourself, that have all been swallowed up and combined into a single mass of harvest and death and destruction. And in came fake countries like Belgium, Luxembourg, Israel, North and Southern Ireland, Monaco, to name but a few. Ireland's real name is Scotia. And given the fact that the US military is the latest in his story to play the world's goose-stepping army, following on from the British and the Dutch, I'm going to ask the question to all American people, is how many Iraqis, Iranians, Afghanistans, Vietnamese, Guatemalans, Hondurans, Venezuelans, Yugoslavs, Czechs, Serbians, Syrian, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen, and Turkish people, plus various African countries. In fact, 81 countries have been invaded by the US military since 1945. I ask you all to answer one question. How many of those peoples mentioned, and in most cases militaries, have attacked you or this country? The answer is a brutal 0. Not one. But these people are commies, jihadists and terrorists. Wrong thinking. Those commies, jihadists and terrorists were all created by the same people who sent us to war to begin with. All of them. Now let's get into some deeper truths. How many Russians, Chinese, North Koreans have attacked you personally or this country? The answer is a brutal 0 again. None. Zip. Nada. But those Russians and Chinese are communists, Thomas. Okay? What is a communist? And why is it deemed so bad? Is the questions back. And you'll get silence. Or a repeat of, well, they're commies. Okay, but what is a commie? Again, silence. Because, you see, so many people just repeat and make statements about items and subjects they know jack shit about. Their silence or inability to explain the statement tells you that. The inability to answer or support their own statement is equal to behaving in a machine-like vessel, because you are not programmed to think. Only repeat the statements provided for you by the portal people. The Russians are this, the Russians are that. The Chinese are this, the Chinese are that. But no one who's listening to this show is being attacked by Russians or Chinese. And this is why this show asks you to ponder, asks you questions back, poses riddles. Because I'm looking for you all to think for yourselves, not repeat every word or statement I say. The information is about and for you, not me. But the media tells us that they did this, that and the other. The media told it. Oh dear. The media told you. If the media tells you to eat babies for climate change, would you believe that? Oh wait, they already did. Have you done it yet? Because the media says so. Does anyone ever ask the question, where does the media get its information from? I can see or feel the raised single eyebrow now. Do you ever ask yourselves, are they always true? Do you ask yourself, why should I accept their information to be true if I don't see it with my own eyes? If only the media was held as accountable to the same levels as our show has endured, I think we would have a much better and clearer picture of the world by now, don't you? And the answer is in most cases, people don't ask those questions, as they were not taught to think for themselves, only follow, copy, listen and repeat, which applies in media, government, military, schools and church. And because they are in some way seen as the bastions of society, they should be automatically believed. The most wrong answer in history. And a complete dissolution of your own sovereignty and your own equal right, role and unalienable rights to think, speak, act and choose for yourself. Hammer point 5. You dissolved your own responsibility and sovereignty. Let that sink in. The final hammer in this piece is all of the above countries never did anything to America or its people in attack mode. Most of the events that took place in those war theatres were carried out by the very people who took us to war. In other words, they were staged events to get the public's reaction, of which the solution they wanted is then ready to deliver. Like I said, not one of those countries directly attacked us, did they? But 2 other countries have. And yet, bizarrely, we have not attacked back, but still have major diplomatic relations, and we still send vast sums of our money and resources to those same countries. Does anyone not ask, why is that? Those countries are Saudi Arabia and Israel. Have you all forgotten the 1967 USS Liberty attack done by the Israelis? Have you forgotten that it was Saudi nationals who were involved in 9/11? Not to mention the killing of the journalist and also the release of their prisoner held here last year. Or the fact that there was dancing Israelis on the bridge in New York, or the fact that they were all arrested and allowed to slip free out of the country, and the company they operated under mysteriously emptied the whole building out and disappeared overnight. Have we also forgotten Netanyahu saying 9/11 was good for Israel? Whilst I don't and never will advocate violence, it never solved anything. But why wasn't the American people up in arms about those events and asking their politicians to deal with the Israel problem in particular? Hammer 6, you didn't ask, or raise your ire, because the portal people never told you that the Israeli Zionists is the boogeyman is why. And that is an example of non-thinking. And we have to teach people, again, to think better, think deeper, think critical, and think different. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and welcome back to the final piece tonight. Think and act different was something I said in the very first THI show. It's not a meme. It has to become a way of life. Everything about society now has collapsed on every level. On people level, everyone divided, put into boxes. Businesses collapsing, banks collapsing, governments resigning, fired or collapsing. Everywhere you look, it's all failing. Because it was designed to fail. And this is what these elite, or so-called elite, clowns do not understand. But they're slowly but surely turning. And eventually it will reach a viral point where it runs away with itself. And then we can go forward in a better way by thinking and acting different, not repeating the same old failed programs. For those who are new, and a reminder of those not new, of what THI and Kim and the trust is all about. I told those who were on MeWe today some of my own personal journey, and it was fairly painful to read some of that. It is what it is. But alerting people to the truth on this planet always comes at a great personal cost. And that was something I was willing to pay. And Kim also. We do not come here bearing gifts and pieces of paper with numbers on them. We came with solutions and solutions for the benefit of the all. We do not come here to control you or anyone else. We came to share, we came to work together, we came to give hope, not desperation. We are not here to dictate to you either, but to guide us all to be a better version of yourselves. We are not here for devolution, but evolution. We are not here to destroy the planet, but its full restoration. Restoration of the people, beings, and all life in and on our planet. We have no interest in hierarchy. That is the failed past. We will not be repeating it in our future. All are equal. All are sovereign in their own right. We're not here to bring fear or hopium. We are here to bring peace, encourage love and abundance for the all. We will not bow to fear, threats, hierarchy, titles or seducements. Those are anti-life programs and have no part in our collective future. We are not here to divide and conquer. We are here to reunite everyone. We are not here to stifle creativity, consciousness or spirit, but here to enhance it on levels not seen for 110,000 years at least. We are not here to dim our lights, but to have you all shine as beacons. The latter of which was echoed in Mr. Trump's speech in Davos on Tuesday. And we will end this show on that note. Quote, "Let us bring light to their lives one by one and empower them to light up the world." This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Another Tommyism. Bye for now.